Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you all again. Have a good conversation. Thank you for being willing to record this. We will share it with our students on the DH program page. And if it's okay with you, we will also take some clips from it so that we can share those on Instagram Reels so that we can also reach more folks with what you have to say and your experiences. So thank you again to our presenters today. Again, for those who are just logging in, I'm sorry I cannot stay. I'm at a conference, but I know you'll have a fantastic conversation and learn a lot from Wendy, Francesca, and Robert. So have a good session, and I'll see y'all soon.
Bye. Okay, so I do see, because we have an RSVP crowd of 22, so we're waiting for a few more.
I see some familiar names. Hi, Giovanni and Yampu.
Yeah, I wonder if there are attendees like in the audience who have some overlap with some of you maybe in the program.
Yampu just got a cuffed mentorship or a cuffed teaching fellowship for teaching a DH class with us. So that's exciting.
People joining. So hello there, welcome whoever just joined us. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Juno and I am a graduate student researcher working with Professor Ashley Sanders in the DH program, and I'll be the moderator of today's career path panel. So before we start, feel free to type in the chat box your background, maybe the program that you are in, and some, because this is a career panel, we'll be talking about our presenters' career path and how they sort of departed from the DH certificate that they got. So it would be helpful if you can share some general ideas that you have about your career directions, just some ideas or industries that you're interested in would be great. We are waiting for maybe a few more people. Let's wait for one more minute before we officially start. Oh, and for today's meeting, we actually have the auto transcript on. So if you find it helpful, you can feel free to turn it on or off, depending on how it can help you the most. It is not perfect, but some people find it really helpful in assisting in an online meeting like this. Okay, so it's 6:05. I think we can get started. Thank you so much for being here today with us on a beautiful Thursday afternoon, early evening, wherever you are. So for the attendees who just joined, feel free to type in the chat box a little bit about your background and some career ideas that you have, maybe industries that you are interested in, because we're still a fairly small group, so that we can, with that information, we can just better make this time and conversation helpful and meaningful for everyone here today. My name is Juno, and I'm a GSR working with Professor Ashley Sanders in the DH program, and I'm the moderator today of the Career Path panel. I'm very excited to share with our three amazing special panelists today. Special welcome to you all. for being here with us and for taking out your time. Our agenda today is to give each panelist approximately 15 minutes to go over and share about your experiences with the DH program, what brought you to DH, what tools and skills you acquired while at UCLA, and your career path since graduation, if you have graduated, or your potential career directions and ideas that you can share with those in the audience today. And if you can just, share some general advice to our current and prospective students in the graduate programs who are interested in enrolling in DH. So without further ado, it will be followed by 15 minutes reserved specifically for Q&A from the audience. So for those of you who are attending, if you have any questions for any one specific speaker today, or just for the three presenters in general, feel free to type them in at any time in the chat box so that we can have like a broader reach of Q&A. Okay, so without further ado, let's get started with our amazing panelists. Let's go over in the order, so we can start with Wendy, if that's okay. And then we can move on to Francesca and then Robert. Okay, so it is my privilege to introduce to you all Dr. Wendy Kurtz. She is a lecturer and project scientist in the DH program at the University of California, Los Angeles, where she teaches courses and supports digital humanities projects through the Digital Research Consortium. Dr. Kurtz holds a Ph.D. in Hispanic Literature from the Department of Spanish and Portuguese at UCLA, and her research lies in the intersection of cultural memory, digital mapping, and human rights. The floor is all yours.
All right, I'm going to share some slides to keep me on track, and so I don't ramble through my 15 minutes. Can you see my slides okay?
Yes.
Thank you for the introduction, Juno, and thank you for the invitation as well, talking about potential career paths. And my path to where I got to today is something that I really enjoy doing. I teach a class on it too. So if you're interested next year, there's a DH professional trajectories class taught through the certificate program, where we get to talk about things like we're talking about today, but also create dossier materials for the academic and alt-ac market as well. Sorry, just a plug for my class there. So Juno already mentioned, I graduated in 2017 from the Department of Spanish and Portuguese with a specialization in contemporary Spanish literature. And I thought that sharing my trajectory from grad school through to the role that I have today might help illuminate how the decisions that we make while we're in grad school can not only help bolster your potential career paths within academia, but how there are some really exciting options both outside of the academy, but also within that diverge from that more kind of traditional tenure track model. I like to kind of call myself the poster child for alt-ac. And so I'll just start a bit with my background and how I got into digital humanities. It was really early in my graduate career that my interest was sparked by DH. I took DH 201 with Professor Miriam Posner and decided to pursue the graduate certificate. And the effects of that decision really fundamentally affected my research and my teaching, and also the skills that I developed while I was in grad school. When I started grad school, I didn't have significant experience working with data or computational methods. And after taking 201, the introduction to DH for grad students, I really recognized the profound influence that DH could have on my research, and that impact really took root almost immediately in the way that I approached my dissertation. And so my dissertation, as was mentioned, lands at this intersection of cultural memory, digital mapping, and human rights. In my dissertation, I analyzed the literature around the current disinterment and reburial of mass graves from the Spanish Civil War and the Franco dictatorship. And so I really became interested in the topic when I saw this map. It's the first time I really understood what a powerful visualization could show us. And what this map is showing is the current exhumation status of mass graves in the Iberian Peninsula. There are over 2,600 mass graves found throughout Spain, and a small fraction of them have been recovered since the year 2000, which marks the beginning of the current disinterments. And so in my dissertation, I used critical theories of performance to argue the necessity to actualize funeral rites before a community of witnesses. And I departed from a cultural studies perspective more than kind of a literary studies perspective. And I looked at kind of more traditional texts like novels and documentaries, but also incorporated a lot of digital media in my analysis. So I was looking at Facebook and Twitter groups, social media content, YouTube short films, radio programs, and other internet sites that were created by the families of those being disinterred. And so to accompany my close readings of the text that I was analyzing within my dissertation, I built a thick map called Virtual Cartographies. And this map is layering that data that the Ministry of Justice used for their map that we just saw for that first visualization. And I mapped that alongside a collection of multimedia texts that were directly related to specific grave sites. And this really started me down the path of integrating computational methods into my research and to develop a specialization in GIS and digital mapping. And it was through my involvement in the DH program that I learned about a GSR that was hosted or was funded through what was then called the Center for Digital Humanities. It's now called HumTech. And I ended up working with CDH. I don't know whether to call it CDH or HumTech, but I was a research and instructional technology consultant, or a RITC, for 4 years. And I had already been a TA through my department for 4 years, and I had exhausted my teaching opportunity there. And I also had a really good amount of teaching under my belt, teaching second language acquisition. And so this was the GSR through the center was a great opportunity to develop some new skills for me. And so over my time with CDH, I supported humanities faculty in the use of technology for both instruction, but also for digital research projects that were undertaken in cooperation with the center. And so I designed and managed research and pedagogy projects in collaboration with faculty PIs. And because the RITC role is kind of a dual role, we also have a hand in instructional design and helping faculty apply pedagogical principles through the use of the learning management system, which is no longer Moodle, no Canvas. But I also gained significant digital research project experience. And so through my time there, I was exposed to different tools and different methods in DH in a real world setting, while at the same time gaining some substantial project management skills. So the skills that I developed over my time as a RITC and in the DH program also facilitated the development of a really rich DH portfolio to showcase the work that I was doing. So that's what the screenshot is, some of the projects that I worked on. And so these projects ranged from methodologies in mapping to network analysis to developing websites for digital projects. And this background really gave me a leg up in the job market. all the jobs that were listed when I went on the academic job market were cross-listed, all digital humanities and Spanish literature. There were no straight Spanish literature job openings when I went on the market. And I did land 2 first-round interviews for tenure track positions. They didn't pan out, but instead I had the chance to put my DH skills into action in an alt-act career. And it was through my work as a RITC and at a conference that we were helping arrange on campus that I met a representative from an academic publisher. And he happened to be looking to hire a DH specialist for his team. He worked for a company called Gale. Gale is the research arm of Cengage Learning. They're an academic publisher. And Cengage is an education and technology company that creates primary source archives and e-learning resources for higher education, K-12 and libraries as well. And so they published digital archive collections, and they were starting to build a cloud-based text analysis platform to work alongside the content that they were publishing. So within a month of graduating and meeting their team, I was hired as their first digital humanities specialist. And my role was to assist in the evolution of their digital scholarship program, which included mainly the support and development of what they call the Digital Scholar Lab. And so the Digital Scholar Lab is an application for performing natural language processing of the company's primary source materials. I helped kind of progress the lab from alpha to beta, doing some beta testing, and finally to a production release in the fall of 2018. And since its release, the lab has been adopted by, at least by when I left the company, it was about 40 colleges and universities across the US and abroad. I advised and supported faculty and students throughout the country in implementing text mining methodologies into their research and into the classroom as well. So I worked with large R1 universities, consortia like the BTAA and the UC system. I ran workshops around the country about text mining and developed pedagogical materials, doing some technical writing also, but also interface between developers and our end users and UX and UI designers. And I got to do all of this while developing my own research projects on the platform, having my conference travel and continued professional development paid for by my company. So I still had the opportunity to work on my scholarship while I was also helping to design and develop the platform. And so I was with Gale for 3 years after graduating, and I saw this job opening at UCLA and really wanted to come back. I really enjoyed teaching more formally in the classroom. And I actually have 2 roles. My appointment is a split appointment, which can be very typical for DH positions. They kind of live in different places around campus, whether in a center or in the library, or sometimes you're the only person in a specific department that does DH. Really depends on the institution. But half of my work is as a lecturer, where I'm teaching in the DH program, and I have the chance to develop my own courses based on my research and teaching interests in consultation with the program, obviously. But I have a lot of autonomy in the types of classes that I teach, and you can see 2 examples of classes that I taught last year. And one is obviously about my love for mapping, and the other was a special topics course about digital representations in Francoist Spain, which obviously touched on my research. And so it's really great to be able to develop classes that I feel really passionate about. The other half of my job is supporting digital projects through the Digital Research Consortium. So I now supervise the RITCs, which is a bit of a change. I'm on the other side now, but also advise and consult with faculty on their digital projects. And this side of my job also gives me the flexibility to continue working on my own DH projects. And this is just one project that I'm working on across with about 20 interns, undergraduate and graduate interns, and 4 affiliate faculty members. We're in the process of transcribing and translating testimonies of survivors of the Civil War and of Francoism. And we're taking this wonderful archive that was created by UC San Diego and are in the process of transcribing and translating with the added benefit of being able to use all of this content now in the classroom and for additional research. So that's really a bonus of kind of my split role. Wow, I'm doing good, well on time. Okay, so parting advice. Here's some things that I kind of jotted down, and I would love to hear what the other panelists have to say, but my biggest advice is to get as involved as you can. And there are a number of ways that you can do that. Present at as many conferences as you can. As grad students, you do have some funding, not only through your department, hopefully, but also from external bodies. I had a few grants to be able to travel to some really great DH conferences, including international ones. So give a paper, present a work in progress, present portions of your dissertation, go to a DH conference and present. I found so many opportunities for project collaborations through my participation in conferences, one of them being that Spanish Civil War Memory Project. I met the PI at a conference that I was giving a talk about my research, but also attend institutes. There are so many DH institutes. DHSI, the Digital Humanities Summer Institute, is usually in Victoria in Canada. And so it can be costly not just to attend the conference, but to pay for travel. But it's online this year. So you have the opportunity to attend some really great sessions and week-long kind of trainings if you want to up your skills in any area. But also teach workshops. There are lots of reasons why, not just to add them to your CV or your portfolio or your teaching portfolio, but it'll help you develop and really strengthen your teaching philosophy. Become a carpentries instructor. The carpentries teach some really foundational coding and data science skills to researchers in an academic setting. And you get a certification through the carpentries to be an instructor, and it'll really just help solidify some computational fundamentals, since it's about how to teach tools and teach about data to people who may not have a lot of exposure to it. And it's also just a really cool credential that you can apply in a lot of interdisciplinary contexts. UCLA runs a lot of carpentry workshops through the library and the Data Sciences Center, so there's ample opportunity to get involved. And then finally, apply to GSRs and TAships outside of your department. It'll help broaden, your skills, and yeah, the RITC call is open for next year. Applications are due April 29th. So it's a great opportunity for funding for a year and some exposure to maybe something you haven't done before. So thank you. That's it. Just a little over time.
It's awesome. Don't even worry about the time limit. It's just a approximate. Thank you so much for this amazing presentation. It's just so exciting to learn about your journey with DH and how DH not only was key to the work that you did for a dissertation, but also help you to be where you are today in your career. And also you put in some really wonderful advice in there in the end. Thank you so much. For our audience, if you have any questions for Wendy, feel free to just send them in the chat box. We'll go to them at the end of our session today. So now I am honored and delighted to turn it over to Dr. Francesca Albrezzi, an art historian, curator, digital humanist, Dr. Francesca Albrezzi works as a digital research consultant at UCLA's Office of Advanced Research Computing and teaches for the Digital Humanities program. She researches digitally immersive technologies used in GLAM organizations. She is affiliated with the College Art Association's Educational Committee, Art History Teaching Resources, and the Digital Art History Journal. Well, welcome, Francesca. Go ahead with your presentation.
Great. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here with you all. And Wendy, apologies in advance for hearing this for the second time within a week. I had the opportunity to present at Wendy's class earlier this week on this very topic. So it's wonderful to do it twice in 1 week. And it's a favorite topic of mine. I really think it's important to investigate the circuitous paths that people take in order to end up where they are. I know mine has not been straightforward in the least. And in fact, when sort of approaching this question, I actually like to go all the way back to high school because that's where I really figured out that I was a visual learner when I took an AP Art History class, and that sort of set me on my trajectory for college, which was art history and American studies. I knew I wanted to work in museums. I just went, this is how I learn, this is how I approach the world. And so I graduated at the height of the financial crisis in 2009 and had interned in museums as a college student, had worked at the Smithsonian, working at the National Museum of American History on a Cigna firefighting and maritime collection. I had worked at LACMA over a summer, doing an internship there, and the Smith College Museum of Art, got an internship my senior year to curate my own exhibition. So I felt really fortunate to have had these opportunities and know that that's the direction that I wanted to go. And then the financial crisis, like I said, hit, and no museums were hiring. Museums operate in the red already. And so during financial crises, they are sort of batten down the hatches and wait things out. So I wasn't able to get a job in a museum, and I ended up working as a paralegal. But in that year, it brought me back around to learning that no, law school isn't where I want to go. I want to go back to school for something else. And so I moved back to Los Angeles and got an internship at the Getty Research Institute in the publications department. And I don't have any lovely slides to share with you today, but I do have my website that I'll put up here that I'll sort of make my way through as I'm talking about different parts of my career. But when I was at the Getty Research Institute, I started off in publications, and we were really trying to figure out what the future of publication would look like. And so I ended up in a meeting with Mirtha Baca, who taught at UCLA in the Information Studies department as well. And she was the head of digital art history at the GRI. And I just went, well, what is this? This sounds really cool. This seems like the future of the discipline, to marry technology with art history. That just sounds fantastic. So we had a couple of meetings, and her RA was retiring from that position that she held, was moving into a different position. And so Mirtha said, well, why don't you apply? And I ended up becoming her research associate, which was a wonderful opportunity for me, and really where I discovered digital humanities through the avenue of digital art history. So I can sort of click here and show you, had these past projects starting at the Getty, where I worked on the first digital critical facsimile edition, which was a project known as Digital Mellini, but it was around this inventory that was written in verse and was dated from 1681. And so we looked at this inventory and created a project that had transcriptions and translations, side-by-side views, annotated comments, and it was all digital. So it was really about exposing the process, the scholarly process, as much as possible to an audience. And it was a totally different way of thinking about scholarship for me. And it really sort of set me on fire. It also allowed me to think about the kinds of skills that are needed to do this kind of work. And so I started apprenticing along our technical team to learn how to work with Drupal, how to do markup language. And that really helped me sort of start figuring out that I liked technology. It was an outlet, a creative outlet actually for me. And so I decided, well, if I'm going to go back to school, I want to pursue this in some way. So originally I was thinking I'd go back to school for art history, and I was touring schools in the area. Of course, UCLA, #1 public university in the country, had to check out their art history department. And when I was going around this tour with this tour guide and explaining how interdisciplinary my interests were, she recommended I looked at the Department of World Arts and Cultures /dance. And it ended up being a perfect fit because this department was one which really approached things from a cultural studies standpoint, but also had people from all different sort of other disciplines. But the main thing that sort of connected us was this social justice undercurrent to our work. And so it really became a great home for me. I applied, I was accepted, and it just, that's where my graduate sort of work started. And I created a master's thesis called Visiting Digital Tombstones: Unearthing Questions of Digital Personhood, Commemoration, and Remembrance Processes. And it was my first opportunity to really look at digital technologies through a cultural studies lens and think about digital device users and their relationship with digital devices in order to tease out the ways that human and computer interactions shape concepts of personhood by utilizing Alfred Gell's concepts of the art nexus and the distributed person as frameworks for examining digital applications that were being incorporated by some users into processes of remembrance and mourning. And so as much as I appreciated being in this sort of interdisciplinary department, I did find that in terms of the technology side, I was a bit of an outsider. And so no one was really focusing on that intersection of digital culture and art. And so the DH program became a complete safe haven for me. And I ended up TAing for Miriam Posner, Professor Miriam Posner, for many years for DH 101, where I learned so many skills. I mean, if you've ever taken DH 101, you'll know we learn mapping, we do text analysis, we do data cleaning, all kinds of sort of the basic tools of digital humanities. And so that for me was a really important learning experience. And I ended up using that opportunity and working with Professor Posner as a GSR as well on a number of summer digital art history conferences, which really, again, gave me the opportunity to build this network of digital art history, digital humanities, and sort of explore how I could connect with others in this field. And when I was doing that, I was also taking classes in things like human and computer interaction. And I realized this is where my people are at. This is where people are doing the kind of work that I'm interested in doing. And so it was also around this time when I was working toward the PhD that I started to experiment with this little Samsung Gear 360 camera. And I used it to capture a few performances that were happening on UCLA campus, as well as an exhibition that I did for Professor Posner's digital museums class. We had curated an exhibition, a physical exhibition in special collections at UCLA. And I was able to capture that using the 360 camera and create a tour through that exhibition space. And let me see if I can find that here just to quickly show you. think it's not on this page. It might be on another page. Probably on immersive tech. So this became a thing that I really felt passionately about, which was being able to capture an installation of a museum exhibition could reshape the way that we taught museum studies. Most of the time we see a few pictures from an exhibition and that's all that we get. And the sort of design Bibles that are built in the process of creating an exhibition are kept within the museum itself. And so you have to have an internship or access in another way in order to sort of learn from them. And my thought was these types of tours could be a way of teaching museum studies in a new way and exhibition practice in a new way. And so my dissertation was on virtual actualities, technology museums, and immersion. And I looked at modes of publishing, display, and information capture in museums and archives that illustrate a break in traditional modes or models, and argued that digital modalities provide a distinctly different paradigm for epistemologies of art and culture that offer greater contextual understandings. So that's really what my research is now. And I'm generally interested in spectrums of immersive technologies in relationship to GLAM organizations, so galleries, libraries, archives, and museums, as offered by technologies like virtual reality, augmented reality, 360, photo and video capture as examples. And I've been building virtual exhibitions every chance I get at this point. So it's a way to practice my curatorial skills with less overhead in many ways. And so for the Digital Art History Journal, which I'm a part of, we've put on 2 virtual exhibitions now. I've also worked with the European Cultural Center to produce exhibitions for them. And this really was a way for me to channel all these digital skills that I've been learning into a creative output that connected with my scholarly interest as well. But, you know, sort of just in summary, I also was a RITC and went through that program. Robert will probably talk about his time as a RITC as well. The DH program offered me an incredible amount of support, and even after I graduated. So they offered me a teaching gig the summer that I graduated, and I was able to then move into this position in the Office of Advanced Research Computing that was looking to bridge the way that we support technology, faculty who are interested in using technology in their projects, where it was not so South Campus focused, right? It wasn't so science-based, and really reach out to North Campus, which is where I had been doing my work, and the faculty that I knew were on North Campus. So it was an opportunity to sort of bridge that for OARC. And I really feel like I've landed my dream job. It's been a wonderful experience. And I would just echo a lot of what Wendy had recommended, which is getting involved to start building your network now as graduate students. It's really helped me get to where I am. As mentioned in my bio, right, I've been working with the College Art Association, and that started with giving conference papers. Art history teaching resources was just a passionate group of people who wanted to create open educational resources. And so I jumped at the chance to be able to support and do that. And really these people have become they're both peers, but also friends. And between that and find the enjoyment factor for you within this process, I think the way that I fell in love with immersive technology was first because it was fun. And so if you can find something that is fun and enjoyable, and then that feeds back into your research, I think it can make that process that much stronger. So I'll leave it there for now. Thank you all so much, and looking forward to questions later.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Francesca. It is so rare and exciting at the same time to know someone whose ties to DH goes all the way back to high school, and how, you know, you've come a very long journey to be where you are here today. And it's just super cool to look at the, you know, stuff that you do for your online portfolio. I mean, if you don't mind sharing your personal website in the chat box, we can all take a, you know, another look at it after the session. And also, if you have any questions for Francesca, please leave them in the chat box. Okay, so now we can move on to our next presenter, Robert Farley. Robert is currently the literary historian for a new global video game company called Famico Studios, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, and a PhD candidate in comparative literature at UCLA, while finishing his dissertation on digital grassroots archives on the sexual rights movement in Arabic. He has transitioned over the last year to delivering SWANA-based historical and cultural research to game developers, principally in the areas of art, design, and mechanics. He came to the DH program in 2018 by working as a research and instructional technology consultant for UCLA Humanities Technology and what was then known as the UCLA DH Accelerator Program. So Robert, welcome, and please feel free to take it over.
Sure. Thank you, Juno, and thank you to Professor Sanders for organizing all this. And also, it's really nice to see Dr. Albrezzi after I met her as a RITC actually back in 2018. And really nice to meet you, Dr. Kurtz. And glad to hear that you're also kind of coming from that background to this RITC background that kind of ties us together. This is actually the main way that I have found myself into DH. I admit that I'm kind of on the fringes of being an alum because I technically am not a certificate holder, and I'm also still not quite graduated, but so I'll keep my kind of trajectory pretty short because it literally is still kind of happening. So I started in DH as a RITC, and so that exposed me to a lot of just different ways of kind of thinking about digital tools and humanities research, which was really, I mean, I came like kind of like very wide-eyed, like I really wasn't sure what the digital humanities side was about. I understood the kind of the LMS, okay, we help our faculty and students with, you know, kind of navigating Moodle, which itself was, you know, a Kafkaesque maze kind of place. But I would say it's, I kind of like it still more than Canvas, but that's beside the point. But I worked on an annotation tool with the English department. I worked a little bit with GIS, not so much in the nitty gritty of actually making the maps, but a little bit more just about conceptualizing different ways of mapping. And a lot of times I found myself actually reverting to my very kind of like old school trained research, just reading and looking for data in a very kind of I don't know what you'd call it, like a brick and mortar kind of way, where just kind of working with text in Arabic, which, you know, it's technology for OCRing Arabic and just getting and computer reading Arabic has gotten a lot better, but still it's kind of hit or miss, and even in a couple of years ago, it was even worse. And so it's just certainly a kind of a challenging. It allowed me to really kind of lean on more traditional styles of scholarship. So I did that for a year, and like a lot of RITCs, I kind of found myself in that space as someone who was not quite feeling it with the kind of more traditional ways that we were being brought up in the department. And so I found kind of a home there in the public affairs building. And it really helped me branch into a new part of a new segment of campus, an interdisciplinary section of campus who were, all humanists in some ways, or social scientists, and all interested in really, it was really cool to hear about your work, both of your work today, just because, everyone's interested in such, interesting questions, and it was just really a place that I felt like I could thrive. And so I kind of moved from there because you kind of stay in these networks. And I worked with Professor Sanders and Nina Biekovic from the Italian department, putting together with the Online Teaching and Learning Initiative to develop the DH 101 online version. Back in 2019 as well. And then from there, I had professors that I knew from outside DH that were like, oh, you have experience with technology. Can you help me with my project? Or can you? And so I ended up doing working for a quarter, just helping a group of professors put on a symposium. Incidentally, all of these things were kind of leading up to almost, March 2020, and all of a sudden everyone's online, and a lot of the stuff that I had been working on became a lot more normalized. But it really, that kind of threw it really. I think it made everybody kind of take a step back and say, okay, what's my career look like? What am I doing? How am I going to get to the next stage now with these kind of new configurations? And so the way that I got into video games, which I've been involved with since last March, was simply responding to a call that that went out on a listserv where they were looking for a cultural consultant for a game they're making that's set in the Middle East. And if you know about the representation of Arabs or Islam in popular culture, there's a very long history of really not getting it right, really, and having racist stereotypes and all of these things. And so they were looking for someone to do cultural consulting, and I emailed them and I said, hey, listen, this is my profile. I know I'm not quite what the calls, but I apply for stuff that I don't seem right for, and I'm just like, I think I could kind of wiggle my way in. And so that was the same approach that I took with this job. And it turned out that they were making a game that was actually very much reliant on a knowledge of the literary landscape of kind of medieval Islam. And I should say now I'm kind of confined to an NDA, so I'm kind of have to keep a lot of the details about the project out of. So I'm hoping I'm not being too vague when I talk about the project, but essentially it's set in the medieval period during at the height of the Islamic Empire. And so they're like, well, you don't quite fit for this cultural consultant position, but actually your knowledge and background fit quite nicely with the actual content of the game, of the IP. And so this is where I kind of discovered that there's a whole, position, or kind of there's a whole job that's dedicated for people, researchers, to be able to use IP and to make it or to use text, to use whatever the kind of the intellectual property that the company is interested in, and kind of pulling out information that is useful for someone who's either writing a script or designing a game or whatnot. Kind of translating content for entertainment. And so this is kind of where I'm situated now. But I'm kind of all over the place a little bit with some of the jobs. And so I should say that the game just finished its kind of demo phase, and now we've been approved we got the green light actually, and we are kind of recently, and so we're transitioning to kind of a new configuration. And so my job has taken on a couple different personalities, but one of them, consistent ones, has been like reviewing art, for example, looking at concept art made by artists that are supposed to depict a particular scene that would be representative of the video game, and making sure certain aspects of it are right. Are the clothing historically accurate? Is the architecture suitable for the time period and the place, or is the climate something that makes sense for that place? And then that's the more kind of realistic or historically based feedback. And then there's also the more kind of creative feedback. What kind of storylines, what kind of characters, archetypes, what kinds of what are different gamifiable aspects of certain stories or tropes that we can utilize in the game. And so those are kind of my two main areas, lots of reviewing, and also interfacing a lot with the game designers and the developers. For a while, right now they're kind of transitioning again, like I said, to this new phase, but I was giving weekly lectures based on the interests of the game designers. Sometimes it would be like, can you tell us, everything that you think we'd want to know about a particular city? Other weeks would be like, what would be some special items that you might find during this, in this landscape? And so I've, and part of it, I should say too, is, working with content management systems, mostly in kind of like the more blog form, creating a game Bible or kind of a wiki format game Bible, which is something that I had some experience on, doing with as a RITC and with DH. I also use story maps sometimes in relating information, because you are, representing a real place and representing, and sometimes, using geographical data to tell a story has been really useful for kind of getting, the developers to understand kind of like the broader picture of what's going on historically. And so I've used and relied on some of the tools from DH, but really I think that some of the most important skills that I got were really from, working on teams, which is something that, in the first half of my graduate career, it just was like non-existent, and I didn't even think that was my future. That's like, oh, the team is no longer a thing. It's just me and the books. But those interpersonal skills and project management skills, being able to kind of keep track of all of the requests that will come in. Sometimes yesterday, someone will send me a message, hey, can you tell me how flight, how can we make something fly? Tell me all the ways that something flew in, like the kind of the fictional tales, the folklore, all of these things. How could someone do that? So it's keeping up with all of that stuff, and kind of keeping up with the reviewing objects. Like sometimes I'm looking at would this ceramic work for this time period, or would this particular architectural motif be appropriate for this time period and place, and kind of keeping track of all of those things. Certainly the project management skills, and being exposed to useful tools like Trello and things like that I had also really just wasn't something that I came across during my graduate career. And so up until I was involved with the DH. So I thank you for listening to me go. I would echo the advice as well from my co-panelists about getting involved and talking to people. It's really like I feel like that's been the number one way that just like work gets done, and you hear about things, and people know who you are, and they can say like, oh, like I mentioned before, I had professors who knew that I had been a RITC, and so they started calling me for things. And sometimes it was like, can you help me with my website? But then, that quickly leads into like, can you help me with my project? Or can you help my colleague with their project? And so, it's a very, you become someone who is reliable and useful, and in a field that is constantly changing. I mean, the RITCs of today, even, I feel like, are working with very different obstacles and challenges as the RITCs of our 2018-19 year. So thank you again, and I hope you've all enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, Robert, for sharing the most recent version of what is the experience like being a graduate student enrolled in DH. And I think we know that you're not quite an alum yet, but we all think that, I'm sure many in the audience would find your experience very relevant to what they're experiencing right now. So now we do have some time for our Q&A as promised. So if you have questions, please feel free to type in or unmute yourself. I see Yunpu raised your hand. I do have already one question from Lynn in the chat that was from a little bit ago. So I'll read that first. It is a question for Wendy and Francesca. In your experience to teach DH, what do you find most useful to teach students? Are students most interested in learning different technologies as widely as possible, or learning a variety of DH projects other researchers are doing, or something else?
I can start if you want. I really think it depends on the classes that you're teaching and the way that you design it. Some classes that I teach are very much focused on one specific methodology. So like my mapping class is all about the different ways that you can put together different mapping tools in order to create a robust project. But the focus is all on digital mapping and using GIS. And so that's different than like the digital storytelling class that I just taught in the fall, where we're using different tools in order to be able to explore the different ways that you can tell stories digitally. And so it really, for me at least, depends. And I lean on DH projects as a way to kind of show potential to students, not saying like you're expected to have this fully fleshed out wonderful project that people have spent the last 5 years of their lives developing, but this is what we can strive for and work towards if you want to continue to develop out the work that you're doing in the classroom. So I really use those projects as more of a guidepost to show what the potential is. Yeah, I think that's what I have to add.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo a lot of that, and really, I think some students come thinking that the tools are going to be the most valuable thing, and what I try to make sure that everyone always understands is that the tools change over time. That sometimes it's actually difficult to keep up with the tools because they're proprietary and they're always shifting. I remember Google Poly, for example, was something that was really popular in the immersive realm. 3D, it was a great free 3D repository for those working with either 360 or 3D data to place their data online and share it really easily. And Google decided to not support that anymore. And I know that that's happened with a number of other Google projects. And so I think the thing that I try to emphasize with students is that it's about the methods, and that once you sort of get exposure to some of these things, the rest of the things become easier. And that you'll be able to sort of adapt and adjust and feel more comfortable. And so again, I try to more emphasize being uncomfortable with discomfort. So that intimidation factor that comes with a lot of technology, to try to demystify those types of things as much as possible. Our feelings of anxiety around technology, how can we step back from that in order to allow ourselves to learn? And then marry that with meaningful content. I think it doesn't, for students, DH projects are a vehicle for understanding, as Wendy was saying, Professor Kurtz was saying, possibilities. But ultimately it's about, what is their central content that they want to work with, and how can we support them in that? So when I teach a digital curation class, we're more focused on the process of how do you start, working with the collection and understanding comparisons, using digital tools to do comparisons. But it's really about comparison more than it is about the digital tool to do the comparison. Same with building the exhibition, right? It's less about the tool that we use to create the immersive environment, more about what are those decisions that we're making when we build something like this, because it doesn't matter whether it's in the physical world or the virtual world, those decisions still matter.
Yes, I think Francesca and Wendy both are very involved in teaching in the DH program as well. So they're the wonderful people to reach out to for questions related to teaching DH. So I do see one hand raised from Yunpu. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Hi, I'm Yunpu, and nice to meet you all. And it's great to meet you again, Professor Wendy Kurtz. And the first question is for Wendy. So you mentioned workshop in carbon trace instructor. So I'm wondering, how do we apply for this one? And is this for UCLA library? And the second question are for all of you. So because I will be on the job market next year, so I'm wondering whether you can share how many jobs did you apply for, and do you have any tips for us to get at least maybe the final list or to get an interview? Yeah, thank you.
Oh, Wendy, you're muted.
Thank you. The carpentries aren't exclusive to UCLA. It's an initiative that has, it's essentially a program where you can go through a certification process to teach certain tools, such as using the command line or Open Refine. So they have a number, or introduction to Python. So it's really some computational fundamentals, and you go through the process of first becoming a helper, so that you're sitting in on these workshops that are run by people who are certified in the carpentries. We have a lot of folks certified in the carpentries at UCLA, so we run a lot of carpentries workshops. But you essentially, I think it's carpentries.org is their website, and you can apply to go through the training. So it's not anything that's run through UCLA. We just, we happen to have a lot of carpentries workshops that we offer. And so that would give you the opportunity to be able to teach some of those carpentry courses while you're at UCLA. So I think as long as you're certified, you can participate with anyone who's planning to do a carpentries workshop. But so it doesn't have to be at UCLA, but we do have a lot of opportunities to participate in that. And I'm not a certified carpentries instructor, but I hear that it really is beneficial. I'm considering it. It might be fun. I don't know.
And then in terms of going on the job market, I'm probably the worst person to ask because I really have lucked out in finding positions. I've sort of magically fallen into one position after another, but I sort of lean on the fact that a lot of these opportunities came from reaching out to those people around me when I knew sort of could see into the future that I was going to need something down the line fairly soon, and just saying, you know, do you know anything? Do you know about anything? Is there anything you think I would be a good fit for? And I happen to luck out in that sense. So hopefully Robert and Wendy have a little more advice on that. But the process itself is one that I mean, being on the job market is an incredible learning process. I really found. And preparing for job talks is a great skill. And again, lean on your DH community because no one prepares for job talks like DHers. I feel we have so many different angles that people can ask questions from. And so it's really helpful to have your community to support you sort of in just preparing for that.
Yeah, I'll say I went on the job market the year that I graduated. I think I applied to 4 jobs, and it was specifically because they were listed as DH. They were kind of cross-listed, the position, just because I knew that that would set me apart as a candidate. And so, I mean, I was finishing my dissertation and working on the application materials, which, as everyone knows, putting together your dossier for the academic job market is not an inconsequential task. So, I mean, my materials were strong and I'm sure they can improve, but it was enough to land me 2 first-round interviews. And it was just a really great experience. I didn't get them, and I kind of fell into that alt-act job with Gail. And I mean, for me, that was a really satisfying job. And then I kind of also fell into this position when I applied. And it's, you know, not a tenure track position. It's very, very much all to act. But I think, again, like Francesca was saying, networking is extraordinarily important. I was contacted by 2 search committees to request that I put in an application for tenure track jobs. And so, and in the email, they specifically said that one of my colleagues had recommended me for this job. So I through that know that it is those connections that you're making, even if they are really informal connections, those are both in the academic job market, but in the alt-act even more, or in the private sector, if you go that route. The connections that you make with other people are really what can be helpful. And there's a lot of serendipity in it as well. It's not, like Francesca was saying, it's a lot of luck and finding your niche and being able to speak well about the research that you do, but also connecting threads. So, you know, being able to talk about your research, you know, your scholarship, both from your disciplinary background and in your field, and making sure that you're able to marry that really well with the DH work that you're doing, so that it's not this kind of siloed part of your existence, but is really, you know, crucial to the way that you work as a scholar. So I think if you're able to position yourself really well that way, then when you do go on the job market, you'll just have that much more success.
That's wonderfully put. I'll say my experience on the job market is super limited. I applied to a kind of a handful, and I was looking, basically they kind of ranged from, like, you're either totally in the library, or you're like faculty working with the library, or you're just faculty. And most of the jobs, not all, but most of the jobs that I applied to were like some kind of digital humanities or working with kind of like Society and Technology Center or something like this. So not so much methodologically digital humanities, but there were a few jobs like that. I didn't really get too far. I was also still, I was at the very, very early stages of my dissertation. Now I'm a little bit further on, so it's a little bit different if I were to do that, but I haven't applied since I've been working with the game company, but I would imagine that leveraging kind of that unique quality. So like when I would go to more kind of traditional departments, I would leverage the digital side, while if I was going to more digital humanities based jobs, I leveraged my Arabic and my kind of my area studies as something that I could kind of bring to kind of spice up the place. So, but yeah, making job applications, they're certainly they're like a part-time job a little bit. So certainly take the time to do it. And I mean, once you make, I think, solid materials, it's like, then it's just about revising slightly as you go. But
Wonderful. So thank you all so much for sharing your experiences with the last question. I see that is 11:07, so we're running a little bit overtime actually. Thank you all for still being here with us. I just since we're running out of time, I just want to really say thank you for all of you who came here today to join us on Zoom, and special thanks for our wonderful panelists for making this happening, for making this possible. We had a great opportunity to hear about each of your unique experiences, journey with DH. And I personally, as a grad student, also benefit so much just for being here and speaking with you all. Yeah, thank you so much. For the audience, please stay tuned for our future events and more career series, talks and events on social media as well. So yes, thank you all again for joining us.
Thanks, Juno.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
thank you. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Have a good one. Best of luck.
Bye, everyone.